Hi, my name is Jacco vanderKooij. Over the past years, I've been looking at sales from a different perspective. I've looked at this as a science that has processes, methodology, has all kind of elements that could be repeated, not just by the experts in the field, but by the common person. Today, I'm going to show you how by visualizing some of these processes, you can not only make yourself better, but you can identify key things that are going wrong in your organization. I'm going to do this to two things. I'm going to look at a process view, and I'm going to look at an engagement chart where we are engaging and learning how a customer responds to a demo. Now, let's start first with the process chart. In the process chart, I'm going to go to your website. And when I go to your website, I'm going to figure out what buttons there are. So for example, there will be a button talk to sales. There will be a button want to trial. There will be a button demo now. I want to get a demo. There also will be something like download ebook. There will be like sign up for a webinar, right? And all these particular things, what they do, they all drive conventionally into an inbound process. Now, when they come in as an MQL, and that MQL drives into an inbound process, right here. Following that inbound and following that qualification in the inbound, it then becomes what we call an SQL. Now, it's not only inbounds that can be driven. Obviously, I got other options there as well. And one of the options that you commonly see is that I have an outbound process. Now, the difference in the outbound process is I got several different tasks in there. And so in the outbound process, you will see tasks as, I may have to pitch or something like that. I may have to handle objections, different tasks. Let's say down here, I have only 2 tasks. Down here, I got 4 different tasks. And in this case, when I go outbound, I'm going to go to my database of prospects. These are people with a phone and email, and so I'm going to go into that. Now, if I don't have those prospects, then I'm going to create a separate task. Right? And that is, like lists or whatever that is. Create that list. I'm going to put those lists into my prospecting database, and then I'm going to apply outbound techniques to that. Now, following SQL, I'm going to go into a form of a diagnose. Some of you may call this qualification, but I'm going to diagnose. At the outcome of that diagnose, what I'm going to see that SQL is now an SAL, and this diagnose is often performed by the AE. So set it up by what they call an SDR. Following that, so now I got somebody found the lead, came into the website, it's confirmed. I set up a diagnose call, and the AE says, I'm ready to go. I like this. They're going to go through an SAL. Following that SAL, what they're then going to do is they may do a disco demo, a discovery call, potentially with a demonstration of some sort. And demonstration could be a PowerPoint as well. But they're demoing. They're going to demonstrate what they can do. In this process, what many of you often find is like, look, this is a simplified process, right? It's not that complicated. But by simply putting it on the board, I can now say, hey, what needs to happen during the diagnose, right? And what I can also say is like, you know what? What does this SAL criteria actually mean? What does that mean? What are the criteria here? Because I need to know, in order to be an SAL, it needs to do this. And likewise down here, I can say, down here, I also have a form of a criteria, right? These are criteria. And so as this sales process occurs, I can say, okay, this part of the process is the SDR, and this part of the process is the AE. So I can now say, AE part of the process. SDR part, well, let me draw that all the way up. SDR part of the process. I can show and demonstrate who's responsible for which part of the process. And so in this process chart, I start to visualize things. And one of the great problems that we find is that, or one of the great things that we find, is it allows us to also identify where problems go. Because I want to go like, you know what? I don't have enough MQLs. I can now say, or I don't have enough SQLs. I can say, I measure here, and measuring here, my SQL flow has dropped from 50 to 40, or it's gone from 50 to 100, whatever it is. Something has happened here. I can go upstream and say like, well, most of them came from inbound. And as I then look for inbound, what I start to see is that, like essentially that all these MQLs coming in, that something went wrong with that. And here's where it went wrong. When I looked at the MQLs, I noticed that the ones that came in on the demo and trial, and the few that came in on want to talk to sales, just a few, they were actually the most valuable ones. And the reason why they were valuable is they came in on time sensitive. When the customer approached us here, the way how we had to respond was, how may I help you? How may I help you? That was the response. And it was time sensitive. I had to be really worried about it, because if somebody says I want a trial and I let them wait for a week, that's not good, right? Often, I don't know about you, but if I install a Chrome plugin, the moment I install it, dootski, boom, I want it immediate. I don't want to reset the browser for sure. I want instant gratification. That is how fast these people want to have a response. Seconds, maybe minutes, a few minutes. But gosh, no, not for sure, not beyond 5 minutes. And so I want instant response down here. But now think about the download of that ebook. Remember the ebook that I downloaded? Let's say it was a 100-page ebook. Do I really want an immediate call telling me like, hey, did you read the ebook yet? No, Dudski, I did not yet. Essentially, it's still downloading. It was 68 megs, and it's at 48 right now. So time is less of an issue. Now, I'm not saying that you shouldn't go and treat it with immediate response. I'm saying think about it. Is it the right process? For example, a webinar. I sign up for the webinar. Do I want an instant contact? Hey, I noticed you signed up for the webinar. May I ask, would you be interested in having a meeting with us? No, doesn't work. And so what we see is that these two processes, they essentially generate a different kind of MQL. And this kind of MQL, somewhat quasi-MQL, right? As this go into the process, they do not go into inbound. No, they go to outbound. And guess what the first thing of that outbound process is? The first thing that people do in that outbound process is research. And research means that I now noticed who signed up for the webinar. I now notice who downloaded the ebook. And I start to first create some context, learn about what the customer situation is. So then when I outreach to them, that I actually have some context. I noticed that you're currently hiring 12 people. So understanding from the ebook that you downloaded on how to grow your company, it starts to make sense, right? What we see down here, we have simply identified two different processes responding to inbound. A time sensitive that generates an MQL, and a non-time sensitive, a quasi-MQL. And that quasi-MQL go into the outbound process and not the inbound process. Now, I can explain to you what the science behind that is. Why does that happen? Why is that different? And why do you need to think of them different? The indication of time certainly is one of them. But to take it a little step further, I'm going to draw a traditional sales funnel. And in this sales funnel, I'm going to create 3 stages. Stage number 1 is awareness. Okay, now in awareness mode, the customer realizes that they have a problem. Then they're going to educate themselves. And during the education, they want to learn more about the problem, but also about solutions. They're going to come to a short list of a few solutions. And then they're going to go into the selection process. And in the selection process, they often are having 2 or 3 vendors that they're participating. Now, when I am, if I see which part of this process here is the selection process, probably right from here, somewhere like this is the people responsible for the selection process, right? So this down here is the selection process. Now I'm going to look like, hey, what is the difference between downloading a white book and signing up for a webinar? Well, probably when I do that, I am somewhere more in the education stage. I'm more learning about things. And when I want to and demo and trial, I most likely am a little bit more in the solution stage. Down here, I want to learn about the problem. Down here, I want to learn about the different solutions. These are different stages. That means that the behavior that you have in the blue chain has to be very different behavior. Even when you outreach, you're trying to establish the problem with the customer. You're trying to see if they recognize it. Whereas a customer that already has established that comes into an inbound. Therefore, it's one of these red tasks. Simply realizing and visualizing this now helps us understand What are we doing? And this is why we say selling is a science. Sales is a science. See it, visualize it, depict it, put your finger on it and say, like, it's going wrong down here. We don't have enough numbers. If you can't do that, you do not know and understand your machine. Also, what it allows, if I now understand it better, I can look at subtasks. I can say, hey, how do I do my research better in my outbound process? How do I do my communication skills better in my inbound process? How do I use my criteria to understand the customer's qualification better in my diagnose process? Now I can dive deeper and deeper. It explains and it shows you the power of process and how you're charting it out and visualizing that, what you can do with it. Okay, ready for the next one? Next one up. Now what I'm going to do, as I promised, I'm going to dive a little bit deeper here into the discovery, into the demo. And as I dive in here, right here, I'm going to depict to you what happens in there and how we can fix it. Okay, in the demo, I'm going to draw it out. I'm going to use a different chart. The chart that I'm going to use, I'm now going to show and visualize in a different kind of flow. In this flow, I'm going to use two axes. This is the engagement of the customer. Okay, very engaged here on that side. And on the right, I'm going to deploy a 30-minute demo call. So 30, 15, something like that. Make sense? At the beginning of the call, I have to open it. Okay, and during the opening, I'm making sure I recognize the voices and recognize the difference between a decision maker, the specialist, and so on. So I'm recognize the open of the voices. Then I'm going to go into the agenda. And in the agenda, I'm going to summarize what we're here to do today, what the end goal is, and so forth. And then I'm going to perform the demo. And as I perform the demo, after I've done that, I'm going to recap and close. And all that needs to end with exactly 30 minutes. That's the allotted time I have for it. Now, as I have done, I've visualized this, and I've visualized it on the different tasks. Open the call, present the agenda, demo what you're there to demo, recap, and close. However, what we've seen with these simple process flows, that something goes wrong. I'm going to use the color green to indicate customer attention span. What is the customer engagement like? Well, the customer engagement, where you had envisioned it went like this, it doesn't go like that. I know. It goes something like that. Customer's very excited, loves what they're hearing, and then you start demoing it. And you're demoing your best feature ever. You're so excited. In the meanwhile, the customer goes like, I don't really care really about that feature. And so they start dropping. You don't know that because you were so excited about that new feature, right? Wrong thing. Why are you demoing that? And so right as you go next, you start demoing the next point, and the customer researches that. And I don't know about you, but I recognize when people hold their phone close to the camera while they're actually reading their email on their phone while they're looking at you. And so now what we see down here is their attention span drops again. And maybe on the third point, it drops again. And maybe during recap, they slightly pick up, and during the close. And then during the close, you can recognize that they sometimes ask a few of the questions that you had already answered earlier. And in this case, it looks like the customer, like you had hoped that the customer was attending, but like 40% of that call, you lost them. It doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't. Too many calls go like this, and we see it all the time. It doesn't. If you think of it as a science, we can fix it. Here's how. One of the first things we're going to do is we're not going to look at the demo as one fell demo. We're going to separate that, and we're going to create down here and say, hey, let's compartmentalize that in 3 different topics. Number 1, number 2, and number 3. These are 3 different value props that we're going to talk about. At the same time, what we're going to do is we're going to define what a successful agenda looks like. And for a successful agenda, for example, it's very clear that if I want to draw a successful agenda down here, number 1, let's recap the situation. Your problem and your situation was X and Y. What you were looking for is Z. Okay? Would you like to add anything else today? Oh, you like to add X and Y? Let's prioritize. We have 5 things that you want to see. Prioritize. We have 5 things that you want to see. Maybe we should add something. Right? They want to add something. Okay, we cannot demo anything. And then finally, very important, I got to discuss the layout of the screen. Okay? In the layout of the screen, I explain where they need to focus their attention on. because they see that screen for the first time that you're about to demo something on. They see all these bells, whistles, colors, everything is drawing your attention. Like, it's too much for them. Lay the screen out calmly. To the left we have, at the top we have, but where I really like to point your attention to is where I put the mouse at right now, is here. And by the way, when you point your mouse there, can you please not keep moving it? Okay? Because, like, I'm going to be like, my eyes are glued to that mouse. And so when you keep moving it, I keep moving my head. So mouse, point, hand off. That's where I'm pointing. Great. So now I have explained the layout of the agenda, and I've discussed the agenda. I've come to an agreement that we're going to demo these 3 things. Then, and this is important, when I do these 3 things, on number 1, first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to lay out the context. This point is, how do I contextualize what I'm about to demo in your world? It starts with a sentence something like this. Earlier on, you said that, like, one of the key challenges that you were looking at was complicated dashboards. Do I get that right? Yes. Well, today, I love to demonstrate to you how simple our dashboards are put together and how simply they are to digest. Do you think that's a good use of our time? Yes. Then I'm going to demo that particular feature, and the entire time, I'm always putting it in context. And if a customer asks a question, I actually elaborate. Oh, you said that you wanted it to be blue. May I ask, why do you want it to be blue? Right? I draw, and in that process, I learn how to qualify. Then, at the end, I'm essentially asking them at that final stage, can you see yourself? Can you see yourself using, visualize, can you see yourself using this service? Closed-ended question, yes or no? If so, how do you see yourself using this? How do you? Okay. Oh, I'm using it this way. And then the last one, what kind of impact would that have on your business? That impact is important. You're going to put that later on in your recap. That impact is going to go back here. We're going to do that 3 more times. So we're going to get 3 of these impacts going here. Your customers are buying on impact, not because they're actually, like, think your product is just cool. They're all, that's important too, by the way, but they're buying for impact. This will solve my problem. And so what you see down here in this demo, I have now 3 demos in one demo. And in this, what is going to happen is the customer is going to draw this, peek, fall a little bit back, peek, fall a little bit back, peek, fall a little bit back, and so on and so forth. And essentially, you're grabbing their attention way better. On each of these 3 topics, you're engaging them in a conversation constantly. Do you see yourself using this? May I ask how? Where? If they ask a question, oh, I noticed that that's important to you. May I ask why? Very important. Now, what you've noticed here in particular, some of you may have paid attention to this, I have actually compartmentalized this. Okay? I have compartment 1, 2, 3. What it allows me to do, what a compartment allows me to do, that if, let's say, demo number 2 was not the right demo because the customer didn't like it or pointed out that you were not as good as your competitor, it allows you to not let that float into the other compartments. It allows you to compartmentalize that, so when you go with your 3rd item, that you still have a strong leg to lean on. What it also does is, if I create these 3 compartments, I can now start timing myself. For example, I know that my opening should not take more than 5 minutes, and that if for my close, I also need 5 minutes. So that allows me in between these 3 compartments, which give or take are 7 minutes each. So 7 plus 5 equals 12, plus 9 is 20, or 19, sorry. And so Dan is like this, I need to come here right at around 25 minutes. 5 minutes, 12 minutes, 90 minutes. In that case, if I lose track of time down here and I see this clock tick-tocking to 14 minutes, I can still take corrective action here in my next session and not here. Okay, very important. Also, it allows me to make sure that I don't get wrapped around the axle, as they say, on the beautiful creative work that we do. Creative is a topic that everybody always wants to contribute on. And then, oh my God, and I'm like 24 minutes, 25 minutes, ditskis. We spoke about nothing but the least important topic on the agenda, and the 2 most important topics, we've lost time. This is process. It shows you that there's a science behind it. Start with an opening. In the opening, listen to the tone. Distinguish between whose voice is who, so that you can allow that and you can use that to determine if somebody asks a question, if the decision maker asks a question, or the specialist, and so on. Set the agenda. In the agenda, recap what they said before. Your situation was XYZ. You're having a problem with this. Therefore, do you think it's a good idea that we demo number 1, 2, 3 for you, right? Present the layout of the screen. Today we're going to demonstrate XYZ. Don't focus on this, don't focus on that, focus on this item. Put the mouse there. Then start a topic. Hey, the context of this particular topic was, you said your dashboards were complicated. Let me demo to you how ours are different. Demo it. When you do the demo, ask the client, can you see yourself using this? May I ask, how do you see yourself using this? And finally, if you would be using this, what would the impact be? Oh, I would save you a headache. I would reduce X cost. I would increase X revenue. These go back into the recap. You do that 3 times in compartments to make sure that as you step through that one doesn't impact the other. And finally, as you recap the value and you close off the call nicely on time, within 30 minutes, with lots of engagement, the client feels that it was a professional sales call because we applied science. Now, final thing. I often say final thing and then there's 5 things more. Very important. If I notice what went wrong in this call, I can fix that next time. I can listen to the call and I can say, hey, that second thing, I need to improve that. 1 and 3 were right. The opening and the agenda were right, but that second thing was the problem. If not, and if you don't have this visualized, then somebody will be on the call and say, it was a shitty call. And I go like, just because this was bad doesn't make it a bad call. Just one thing was bad. What you get if you don't have a process like this, if you don't have a visualized diagram like this, then you get people's opinion what they thought about the call. Opinions are just that, opinions. And as we say, we got an attic full of other people's opinions. I don't need opinions. I need to know how to make this better. I need to know that all these 3 things were good and why they were good and how I can make them better. That is what treats this as a science. What I'm depicting here to you today is 2 things, 2 very simple things, is how you can create a process flow and use tools that help you create that in order to identify where things go so you can put a finger on them, measure them, and see what went wrong, what went right. And as I step deeper into it, by creating on a specific task that I've identified, in this case, the demo, I can go all the way and create subtasks and start improving on each of the subtasks. That is what modern sales is about. Obviously, you need to have some skills in how to communicate. You need to be, like a knowledge of the product and knowledge of the market. You need to have that too. Don't get me wrong. But just having that won't be good enough. You need to be able to execute this for one simple reason only. Folks, things have gotten a lot faster. The 9 to 18 month B2B sales cycle has compressed into what? 7 to 90 days or 7 to 180 days? But it has compressed. Because it goes faster, you cannot afford the mistakes that I was able to make when I was a B2B sales guy in 18-month sales cycles. If you did something wrong in month 6, who really cared? I mean, like, you had enough time to recover. These mistakes are almost fatal. Before you know it, customers already bought somewhere else. Didn't pick up the phone in the right time. You were not the first one to respond. You didn't schedule quick enough. The demo didn't go well. Boom, there's already a competitor who's doing it better, quicker, and so on and so forth. Process matters. Visualization of process is key. And for that, you need new tools and new thinking. I hope that with this, I've given you some great insights. I'm hoping that it helps a little bit, makes you wonder. If you want to learn more, follow me on LinkedIn at Jacco vanderKooij, obviously, or go to our website, winningbydesign.com. Thank you very much for having me. Looking forward to it. See you somewhere else. See you at the trade show of some kind, sure, okay?